Nora Veltri kept a diary for 22 years without missing a single day. April 14th, 2019, she turned the last page of a completed notebook, opened a fresh one, wrote the date, and then nothing. Not blankness, not silence. 31 days later, she found the notebook full. Every page, her handwriting. A month of entries she has no memory of writing. She's not alone, and that's what should terrify you. Nora Veltri lives in Christchurch, on the South Island of New Zealand, in a converted postal depot on Fitzgerald Avenue that she spent 6 years making into something that feels like home. She works independently, maps, mostly, topographic surveys, coastline renders, commission work for conservation bodies. She tells you this not because it matters professionally, but because it matters psychologically. Her whole career is built on precision, on recording what exists, exactly where it exists, in relation to everything else. She is not someone who misplaces things. She is not someone who forgets. The diary is a look term 1917, burgundy cover, grid, the same model she's used since 2009. She buys them 3 at a time from a stationery importer in Auckland. The one she opened on April 14th, 2019, a Monday, overcast, she remembers the weather clearly, was the 17th in the series. She wrote the date at the top of the first page in her usual way. Compressed numerals, no flourish. She poured herself a glass of water. She sat at the kitchen table. And then she was at the kitchen table, glass of water in her hand, and it was May 16th. Not in the sense that time vanished. She has memories of April and May. She went to work. She grocery shopped. Her neighbor, a retired schoolteacher named Petra Haas, will confirm that Nora waved at her from the garden at least 4 or 5 times during those weeks. Nora apparently attended a client meeting on April 29th and delivered a coastline survey on time. Her phone shows 612 text messages sent during those 31 days. She has no memory of sending a single one. What she does have is the notebook. When she finally opened it on the morning of May 17th, she'd meant to write about a dream. She found 31 consecutive entries, April 14th through May 14th. Her handwriting, confirmed by 3 independent forensic document examiners she later hired out of Wellington. The pressure patterns, the ink layering, the idiosyncratic way she closes her lowercase g, all hers. But the content is not hers. Not in any sense she can claim. The entries are detailed, disturbingly so. They describe meals she apparently ate, routes she walked, the quality of light on specific afternoons. One entry, April 23rd, spends 4 paragraphs on the smell of rain hitting warm asphalt on a street she doesn't recognize. A street she's never been able to identify, despite searching every photograph she took that month. On April 30th, the entry references a conversation with a woman named C. No surname, no context about whether kindness is learned or structural. Nora has no idea who C is. She still doesn't. The last entry, May 14th, is 2 sentences long. The water keeps getting closer. I don't think it means anything yet. Nora contacted me in September 2019, 5 months after the notebook ended. She wasn't hysterical. She wasn't performing distress. She sat across from me in a cafe near the Botanic Garden and placed the diary on the table between us like she was handing over evidence. Because she said that's what it is. Evidence of something she can't explain, written by hands she doesn't recognize as her own. I've been trying to understand it since. Here's what I want you to sit with for a moment. Nora's case came to me unsolicited. I wasn't searching for it. I wasn't running a research project. She found me through an article I'd written for the Meridian Review about false memory clusters in isolated communities, a completely different subject. She wrote to my editorial address and included 2 scanned pages of the diary. I almost didn't read it. The reason I did was a coincidence I still can't fully metabolize. 3 weeks before Nora's email arrived, I'd received a letter, physical, posted from outside Lyon, France, from a man named Édouard Castille, 58, a former railway signal technician. He had enclosed a medical report from a neurologist at the Hôpital Neurologique de Lyon, dated June 2018, noting that Édouard had presented with what the neurologist described as a dissociative episode of unusual duration and undetermined cause. Duration: approximately 27 days. During those 27 days, Édouard had continued working his regular shifts. His supervisor confirmed no performance anomalies, had maintained his apartment, paid his bills, and had apparently cooked himself elaborate dinners based on the photographs found later on his phone. Photographs he did not take, or rather, photographs taken by hands that were demonstrably his, with his device, at locations he'd been before, but which he has no memory of. What he wrote to me about wasn't the missing time. It was the letter he found in his own coat pocket on the day the episode ended, written in his handwriting, addressed to no one. 23 words. You think you remember everything. You remember the stories you told yourself. The rest is just whether you forgot to notice. Édouard had shown this to his neurologist, his general practitioner, his daughter, and a priest. None of them could explain it. The neurologist ordered a full cognitive battery and found nothing remarkable. No lichens, no atrophy. Édouard's memory for everything outside those 27 days was, in the doctor's words, exceptional for his age. I need to be precise here because the temptation is to start pattern matching too quickly and see what you want to see. So let me give you a third case with very different parameters. Siosaia Taufa is 34 years old, lives in Nuku'alofa, Tonga, and works as a secondary school mathematics teacher. In March 2017, during the Southern Hemisphere's early autumn, Siosaia experienced what he described to the local health clinic as a long dream I couldn't wake up from. His medical records describe a 34-day period of functional automatism. He attended school every day. He marked student assignments. His colleagues noticed nothing unusual except that he seemed quieter than usual and possibly tired. When the episode ended, he says he came back to himself while eating breakfast mid-bite, as if someone had turned a light switch on inside him. He discovered that his classroom whiteboard, which he photographs at the end of each Friday as a personal record, showed 34 Friday photographs he'd taken during the episode. His handwriting on the boards was perfect. The mathematics was flawless. But he has no memory of a single lesson. What he does remember, and this is the detail that stopped my breathing the first time he told me. On the last day of the episode, the whiteboard behind him shows a single phrase written in the corner, in Tongan, in his hand. He didn't put it there, or rather, he did, but the part of him that returned at breakfast didn't. The phrase translates, roughly, as, "We were keeping it for you." 3 cases, 3 different countries, 3 different occupations, 3 different years, ranging from 2017 to 2019. None of these people knew each other before I began connecting threads. None of them had significant psychiatric histories. All 3 experienced roughly the same duration, 27 to 34 days, of what I can only call occupied absence. They were present. They functioned. Something was using them, and then it gave them back. But there's more. In January 2020, I received contact from a doctoral candidate at the University of Cape Town named Nora Veltri, who'd been independently cataloging similar reports across sub-Saharan Africa. She'd found 11 cases in 4 countries between 2015 and 2019. Different durations. The shortest was 19 days, the longest 41. But the same profile, no memory, functional behavior, a physical artifact left behind. A note, a drawing, a recording on a device they don't remember operating. Always something written or recorded. Always something left for them to find. Amara's working hypothesis at the time was a novel form of fugue state. I'll tell you why that falls apart in a moment. The obvious explanation, the one that every neurologist and psychologist I consulted reached for first, is dissociative fugue. It's a real phenomenon. It's documented. People experiencing severe psychological stress can enter extended states of functional automatism, during which they perform complex tasks, maintain routines, and interact socially with no conscious awareness and no subsequent memory. The literature is clear on this. Professor Aoife Tanaka, who holds a chair in cognitive neuroscience at the University of Edinburgh and has published 47 peer-reviewed papers on dissociation and memory fragmentation, spoke with me for nearly 3 hours about Nora's case specifically. She was careful, methodical, appropriately skeptical. and she made a compelling case. Dissociative fugue, she explained, is almost always precipitated by extreme stress, trauma, grief, crushing anxiety, and manifests as the brain essentially rerouting around an experience it cannot process. The person continues to function because the procedural and behavioral memory systems remain intact. It's the episodic encoding, the part that writes, "I did this, I was here, I felt this," that goes dark. It's a convincing framework. For about 20 minutes, listening to her, I felt the shape of a satisfying answer forming. Then I asked her about the artifacts. Tanaka paused. A real pause, not a rhetorical one. Dissociative fugue, she said, does not typically produce written artifacts addressed to the returning self. A person in a fugue state does not, as a rule, leave messages for their future consciousness. The behavior patterns during fugue tend to be simplified and repetitive, the brain navigating by habit, rather than generative or self-referential. Someone in a fugue state doesn't write a letter to themselves explaining the nature of memory. They order the same meal every day and take the same route to work. What she said next is what I keep coming back to. She said, "What you're describing sounds less like an absence and more like a presence that's aware it's temporary." She immediately qualified that. She told me not to read anything supernatural into it. She was speaking structurally about whatever cognitive process might be generating the behavior. But the phrase stuck. A presence that's aware it's temporary. Because that's exactly what the artifacts suggest. They're not random. They're not fragments. They're communications. Someone or something inside these people, during those lost weeks, knew that the person who would return would need to find them. The fugue explanation also struggles with consistency. Real dissociative fugues vary enormously in duration. Hours to days, sometimes weeks, but they're messy and irregular, often interrupted by partial recoveries. What Nora, Édouard, Siosaia, and the 11 cases Amara documented share is a strange cleanliness. 1 month, more or less. A fixed horizon, something that begins, runs its course, and ends, as if it had a schedule. I don't know how to explain that. I genuinely don't, and I've spent 4 years trying. Here is the thing I can't make fit anywhere. In October 2020, 14 months after Nora's episode ended, she was sorting through a box of miscellaneous papers, old utility bills, receipts, warranty cards that she'd been meaning to throw out for years. At the bottom of the box, underneath a 2016 bank statement and a folded map of the Mackenzie Basin, she found a photograph. The photograph is 10 times 15 centimeters, printed on standard photo paper, the kind produced by an automated kiosk. Nora does not own a printer capable of producing physical photographs. The nearest photo kiosk to her home is at a pharmacy 11 minutes away on Colombo Street. The photograph shows a woman sitting at a kitchen table, Nora's kitchen table, identifiable by the distinctive crack in the wooden surface near the left edge that Nora has always meant to repair. The woman is sitting with her back slightly turned to the camera. She is holding a pen. In front of her is what appears to be a look term 1917 notebook, burgundy cover. The woman is not Nora. Nora is 41, dark-haired, with a particular build that she describes as angular. The woman in the photograph has lighter hair, worn differently, and appears, from the back, with the limitations of a three-quarter view, to be shorter, more rounded in the shoulder. Nora showed the photograph to Petra Haas, who knows Nora's kitchen well. Petra confirmed, "That's not Nora." The photograph is dated on the back. In the faint stamped print that automated kiosks use, April 22nd, 2019, 3 weeks into the hollow month. Someone printed a photograph of a woman sitting at Nora's table, writing in what appears to be Nora's diary, and placed it at the bottom of a box Nora hadn't opened in at least 3 years. I want to be careful here because this is where things can go wrong fast. I cannot prove the photograph wasn't placed there before 2019 and that the date stamp isn't coincidental. I cannot prove the woman isn't a visitor Nora has forgotten about for entirely ordinary reasons. I cannot rule out an elaborate deception, though the purpose would be entirely opaque. What I can tell you is what the forensic document examiner in Wellington, Dr. Meredith Quain, 17 years of practice, testified in court proceedings 11 times, said when I showed her the photograph alongside the diary. She said, "The handwriting visible on the open page in the photograph matches the diary entries. Not in style, in specific individual letter forms. You'd have to know the diary to replicate that accurately in a photograph." Think about what that means. Someone photographed an unknown woman writing Nora's entries. Entries Nora didn't consciously write, with enough precision in the letter forms to satisfy a forensic examiner. Either the photograph was staged with extraordinary attention to detail for no apparent reason, or it documents something that was actually happening in Nora's kitchen during the Hollow Month. Something that looked like Nora writing but wasn't Nora. Nora keeps the photograph in the front cover of the 17th diary now. She told me she looks at it every morning. Not out of fear, she said, out of something closer to obligation. Because that woman, whoever she is, whatever she was doing at that table, wrote 31 days of Nora's life for her. And Nora feels, unreasonably but persistently, that she owes her something. That detail, you carry that with you for a while. I know I did. I need to tell you something I've told almost no one. It was February 2021. I was in Edinburgh, staying in a rented flat in Leith, working on a longer piece about Tanaka's research. I'd been deep in the Hollow Month material for 18 months by that point. Transcripts, photographs, medical records, Amara's catalog cases. I was sleeping badly. I want to be clear about that up front, because I'm aware of how the rest of this sounds, and I want you to have the full context. On the morning of February 9th, I woke up and the date on my laptop said February 23rd. I sat with that for probably 4 minutes before I did anything. Just sat there. My first thought was, and I'm embarrassed by how long this took, that the laptop clock was wrong. I picked up my phone. February 23rd. I looked at my recent call logs. 14 days of calls I didn't recognize making. My bank account showed 11 transactions I didn't remember. The flat was tidy, tidier than I tend to keep a rented space. On my desk, next to the laptop, was a legal pad I use for notes. At the top of the first page, in my handwriting, was a single line. "You've been asking the wrong question. The month isn't hollow. You are. I want to be honest with you. I can construct entirely rational explanations for what happened to me in that leaf flat. Sleep deprivation causes significant cognitive disruption. Immersive research, especially into dissociative phenomena, can prime the brain to produce dissociative experiences. I may have lived 14 days normally and experienced a form of localized amnesia with a straightforward neurological basis. The note on the legal pad could have been something I wrote in a hypnagogic state, half asleep, processing the material I've been working on. I believe all of that is possible. I also know what Nora looked like when she put the diary on the table in front of me. I know what Édouard's voice sounded like when he read me those 23 words over the phone. And I know what I felt sitting at that desk in Leith on February 23rd, reading a message written in my own hand. A message that was more incisive, more precise, more structurally correct about the nature of my research than anything I'd managed to produce consciously in 18 months. Whatever wrote that note understood the material better than I did. And it did so in my sleep, in my handwriting, and then left me to figure out what it meant. I haven't told my editor about this. I haven't told Tanaka. The only person I've told is Nora. In an email sent at 2 a.m. from that same desk, the night the date came back to me. She replied within 4 minutes, which surprised me. It was early morning in New Zealand. Her reply was 3 words. "Welcome back, Declan." I still don't know exactly what she meant by that. Let's step back from individual cases for a moment, mine included, and try to think about what this pattern, if it is a pattern, actually implies. Because the implications are not comfortable, and I don't think we should pretend otherwise. If something is capable of occupying functional human consciousness for approximately 1 month, maintaining external behavior with sufficient fidelity to fool colleagues, neighbors, and automated systems, then what does that tell us about the relationship between what we call self and what the body does? We assume continuity. We assume that the person who went to sleep last night is the same person reading this sentence. We have very little actual evidence for that. We have memory, which we know is reconstructive and fallible. We have physical continuity, which tells us nothing about who or what is doing the occupying at any given moment. Professor Tanaka, in a paper she published in 2022, which does not reference the hollow month cases by name, though we'd spoken at length, raised a question that I think deserves wider attention. She wrote about what she called the authorship problem in consciousness research, the fact that we cannot, using any current methodology, definitively determine whether the sense of being a unified, continuous self is a real phenomenon or a highly convincing narrative produced after the fact. Now consider what happens to that assumption when you look at Siosaia's whiteboard. We were keeping it for you. Plural. They were keeping it, his body, his behaviors, his professional competence for him. As if the self that returned after 34 days was a tenant who'd been temporarily relocated while renovation work was done. I don't know if that's supernatural. I genuinely don't know where the boundary between the deeply strange and the genuinely inexplicable sits. What I do know is that every researcher I've spoken to, neurologists, cognitive scientists, one philosopher of mind at Aarhus University named Birger Norgard, who spent 4 hours on a call with me describing what he called the deep problem of temporal self-continuity. Every single one of them, when pushed past the polite edges of professional skepticism, said some version of the same thing. We don't actually understand how consciousness maintains the fiction of uninterrupted selfhood. And if something were interrupting it cleanly and returning it cleanly, we might not have the tools to detect it. Amara Dlamini, in a paper she co-authored in late 2022, raised a question that I think is the most honest framing of all of this. Are we looking at a disorder, or are we looking at a process? Disorders are things that go wrong. Processes are things that run. The people who experience the hollow month, Nora, Édouard, Siosaia, the 11 others, and possibly me, though I resist the comparison, don't present as broken afterward. They present as changed. Subtly but consistently. Nora told me she finds it easier to be patient now. Édouard says food tastes more precise. Siosaia told me, quietly, that his mathematics students perform better since. Not because his teaching improved, as far as he can tell, but because something in the way he occupies the classroom is different. He can't explain it. He said, "It's like I take up more space now, but gently. I keep asking myself, what's being done to them? And I keep arriving at the same unsettling revision of the question. What was being done for them? Because here's what I can't shake, and maybe you've already thought of this, sitting wherever you are right now, listening. You have been unconscious for approximately 1/3 of your life. Every night, doing something your waking mind has no access to. You wake up with a vague sense of having been somewhere, occasionally a fragment of imagery, sometimes an emotion without a source. And you call it sleep and you move on. The hollow month people are just the ones where the gap got wider. The ones where whatever usually does the maintenance work during those dark hours, whatever keeps the heart beating and the synapses firing and the body breathing, ran long, overran the usual limits, and maybe, just maybe, had things to do. I have no evidence for that. I want to be clear. What I have is a photograph of a woman in Nora's kitchen, writing in Nora's handwriting, on a day Nora doesn't remember. I have a note in my own hand with a precision I don't recognize as mine. I have Siosaia's whiteboard and Édouard's letter and 23 words that still read, honestly, like wisdom I couldn't have produced. And I have a question that I can't answer and can't stop asking. If you experienced a hollow month, right now, last year, sometime in the quiet middle of a season you don't fully remember, would you know? Would you actually know? And that's where we are. 31 pages. One photograph dated April 22nd, 2019. One woman at a table who might not be Nora, writing words that are undeniably hers. We don't know who she was. We don't know if she meant to be found. Next week, we follow the photograph, where it was printed, who might have paid for it, and what the kiosk records show. Stay with me. If this case unsettles you the way it unsettles me, share it. Pass it to someone who thinks they know exactly who they are. Ask them if they've ever lost a month and chalked it up to being busy, to routine, to the blurriness of ordinary time. The answer might surprise you. Shadow tapes. We go where it gets quiet.